Veronica Singh, and I'm currently a senior at Bloomsburg University, majoring in creative writing with a minor in political sciences. Today I'm going to be talking to you about gender inequality in India, specifically towards the women. We're going to start with India's population. I'm only going to be touching up on this because of the sex ratio. There are way more males than females, which is obviously a problem. There are 1.393 billion people in India as of 2021. The sex ratio of the total population in India is 108.18 males per every 100 females. The percentage of the female population is 48.04% compared to 51.96% of the male population. India also has the highest number of exceeding male population, with the numbers being 54.20 million. And India is also ranked 189th out of 201 countries or territories in terms of female to male ratio. I just want to touch up on the different religions real quick that are practiced throughout, just because it doesn't matter the religion that you practice or believe in India. If you are a woman, you're still going to be faced with inequality issues. So the most popular religion in India is Hinduism. It makes up 80.5% of India's population. Then there's Muslims, which account for 13.5%. Christians make up 2.3%, and Sikhs make up 2%. I am Sikh. My father was born in Punjab, India. Buddhists account for 0.76%, and Jains make up 0.40%. I also have this little chart on the bottom right that shows the Hindus number grow throughout the years since the 1950s, as well as the Muslims. Muslims grow slightly, but the Hindus grow drastically, while the Christians and the others remain at the same rate, if not increasing just by like 1 or 2. So I just want to touch up quickly on the political parties, the national ones that are practiced throughout India. So there's BJP, which is the Bharatiya Janata Party, BSP, Bahujan Samaj Party, CPI, Communist Party of India, CPM, Communist Party of India, Marxist, and INC, Indian National Congress, and NCP, National Congress Party. There are also national party symbols. So these are for people who cannot read or write, which also comes in handy for the women in India, because unfortunately not all of them are allowed to go to school and receive an education. So there's an elephant, a clock, a lotus, a hand, a hammer, pretty sure one's corn, and there's flower, which I think is a very effective idea, because even though the people who can't read and write, they still have their beliefs, and they still might have their own opinion and idea of what they want the world to look like where they're living in. So it's nice that they could still be allowed to put in their input and opinion and vote and make a difference. And I think this is something that we should also include in America as well. So the constitutional rights of women in India. The Constitution of India establishes a parliamentary system of government and guarantees its citizens the right to be elected, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble and form associations and vote. Excuse me. The Constitution of India attempts to remove gender inequality by banning discrimination based on sex and class, prohibiting human trafficking and forced labor, and reserving elected positions for women. In 1950, universal suffrage granted voting rights to all women. This enshrined in Article 326 in the Indian Constitution. Now, I just want to touch up on this real quick. Even though it says constitutional rights, when it comes to discrimination based on the sex, when it comes to human trafficking, forced labor, they're not taken seriously. The Constitution is just words at that point, because they're not implementing it into society the way they should be. I just wanted to show what it looks like when the people of India have to vote, specifically the females. They're holding up their ID because only citizens of India can vote, so they have to prove that they're a citizen. Everyone has to do this. And then they also get inked, which is why their finger is up. Everyone has to do this as well. It's proof that you've already voted, because they don't want you voting twice. And with India's population, it's very hard to keep track of who voted and who did not vote already. So I thought that was very interesting and a nice way to keep track. And I just like the whole little slide of pictures together. all of the women who are making a difference and feeling empowered. So you may be thinking, what is a parliamentary system? A parliamentary system is a democratic form of government in which the party or a coalition of parties with the greatest representation in the parliament legislator forms the government, its leader becoming prime minister or chancellor. On the bottom right, I also included a little like chart to show you how that works. The people choose, and then from there, they have someone who becomes a prime minister or president, chancellor, whatever you would call it. Excuse me. So how does India feel to include women in politics? Women make up almost half of the voters, only comprise about 1 in 10 of the candidates, 9% in Kerala, 7.8% in Assam, and 11% in Tamil Nadu. Gender equality remains a distant dream. There is no dearth of women workers in India's major political parties, but they are regularly sidelined and denied a party ticket to contest elections. Globally, India ranks 148th in a list of 193 countries based on the percentage of elected women representatives in the national parliaments. This is because they fear women with power. They also don't like the idea of women being in charge. So the women came up with a women's reservation bill. So the women's reservation bill is to amend the constitution to set aside for women 1/3 of all seats in the Lok Sabha, India's lower house, as well as in all states legislators. Yet the bill has languished despite passing the Rajya Sabha, India's upper house. In the past 25 years, each time the bill came up for discussion or passage, the Indian parliament saw high drama and hostile resistance, from objectionable comments about women to physical scuffles and ill-tempered debates. The bill has seen it all. In 2010, the upper house of parliament passed a constitutional amendment bill saying that the reservation would cease to exist 15 years after it's implemented. The bill then needed to be passed by the Lok Sabha and ratified by half of India's legislative assemblies. However, it lapsed 4 years later due to lack of political consensus. Touching up on this again, ahead of the 2014 national elections, activists and women rights organizations rallied over women manifestos, which focus on socio-economic empowerment for women and greater political representation. There are many women-related issues coming to the forefront, like safety of women, nutrition, among others. We believe that if society has to change, it has to change with the women coming to the forefront who account for half of the country's population, says Siobhan. These are the women who were protesting in the passing of the women's reservation bill in New Delhi. Very powerful, strong women. We love to see that. Unfortunately, this bill was never passed, and it was introduced in 1996. So the other discrimination that is faced by Indian women that is not related to politics is India is the only large country where more girls die than boys. Girls are more likely to drop out of school as well. In India, girls and boys experience adolescence differently. While boys tend to experience greater freedom, girls tend to face extensive limitations on their ability to move freely and to make decisions affecting their work, education, marriage, and social relationships. As girls and boys age, the gender barriers continue to expand and continue into adulthood, where only we see 1/4 of women in the formal workplace. So now I just have some statistical facts. 1 out of 3 total crimes reported are physical violence or cruelty against women. 1 out of 3 women have experienced some form of physical or sexual violence in their lifetimes. 74.6% are not allowed to enroll in higher education. And for the 48% of the population of women, only 27.4% are in the workforce or employed. And I also want to touch up on Laxmi Argwal. So in 2005, tragedy came when she was only 15 years old and an 11th grade student. She was approached by a man working in her neighborhood, Naeem Khan, who was 32 years old. He proposed to her, but she rejected him. She did not inform anyone about this because her family would have blamed her and stopped her studies. Emphasis on blamed her and stopped her studies, because I brought this up in the previous slides about how they don't want them to get an education. They just want to marry them off. They view women as objects and property, and they don't want them to have an education. They don't want them to go to school. They would rather have them become a wife and slave to their husband or take care of their family. But back to the story. So she rejected the 32-year-old man. She was only 15. She did not tell anybody because she would be blamed, and stopped her studies. So 10 months later, when she was returning from the market at 10:45 in the morning, she received the messages from the same man saying that he loves her and he wanted to marry her. She did not respond. In no time, she was attacked with acid by him and his brother. The brother called her name from behind while riding his motorcycle. When she looked behind as a response to her name, they threw acid directly at her face from the back seat. So this is an example of what can happen if you say no, if you stick up for yourself, if you have boundaries. This is what she looked like before the acid attack. This is what she looks like after. She's currently married and has a child now, which is great news. I would also like to talk about the New Delhi gang rape. So there was an incident that took place when Jayati Singh, a 22-year-old physiotherapy intern, was beaten, gang raped, and tortured in a private bus. There were 6 others in the bus, including the driver, all of whom raped the woman and beat her friend. I didn't include this in the slide, but I did want to say they stuck a pole up inside of her private part, ripped out her intestines, and then ended up throwing her and her male friend that they'd beaten to death on the outside of the road, where they were found by the cops a couple days later. This incident generated a widespread national and international coverage and was widely condemned both in India and abroad. Public protests against the state and national government and central governments for failing to provide adequate security for women took place in New Delhi, where thousands of protesters clashed with security forces. Similar protests took place in major cities throughout the country. Since Indian law does not allow the press to publish a rape victim's name, the victim was widely known as Nirbaha, which means fearless, and her struggle and death became a symbol of women's resistance to rape around the world. I also just want to bring up how, because of this, these 4 men who, well, there was more, but the 4 men who were of age had gotten hung, hanged, whichever way that's pronounced. But they ended up dying, and I think that is a great consequence to their action. They got what they deserved, and I feel like it's also a statement to all of the other men in India who think that they can just walk all over women, beat them, use them for sex, mistreat them, misuse them, and just view them as objects and a piece of property. Excuse me. So there are some improvements made. The UNICEF India's 2018-2022 country program has been developed in response to the identification of deprivations that Indian children face, including gender-based deprivations. Each programmatic outcome is committed to a gender priority that is noted explicitly in a program budget and results. So the one that stood out to me was the WASH. It improves girls' access to menstrual hygiene and management, including through well-equipped separate toilets in school, developing gender guidelines, supporting states to implement the MHM policy. I also wanted to bring up this fact. Abortion is illegal in India, obviously. So I feel like that's another part where they fail at India. They made improvements, but that can be something that could be improved on as well, but it will definitely be looked down upon. But some of the other improvements were advocating for and promoting equal values of girls, UNICEF communications, advocacy, and partnerships, teamwork with media influencers and game changers to advocate for UNICEF priorities, which in the 2018-2022 program includes equal value of girls and boys, increasing and improving girls and women's safe mobility. UNICEF India has begun work in some states to work on new programs with new partners to improve the ability and freedom of women and girls, including to access government services like schools and hospitals. How can the problem be fixed? So the problem can be fixed by changing the value of girls. Has to include men, women, and boys. It starts with all of us. It starts with the way that the women raise the men. It starts with the way that the boys see the men treat their wives, their sisters, all of that. It has to mobilize many sectors in society. Only when society's perception changes will the rights of all the girls and boys in India be fulfilled. Girls have an especially difficult time accessing life-saving resources, information, and social networks in their daily life. Access to programs specifically tailored to the needs of girls with a focus on education, developing life skills, ending violence, and incorporating the needs and contribution of girls from vulnerable groups, including those with disabilities, can strengthen the resilience of millions of girls. And this is just a very empowering photo of all these women coming together, standing strong in their beliefs and feeling united and just connected with one another and being there to support each other. And here's my works cited, and that is all that I have. Thank you for watching.